Welcome back, everybody. We are continuing these days lectures with Internet of Things device fingerprinting, and we have the honor to have back with us again Professor Prahadeshwar Bezawada. He talked yesterday on phishing detection and machine learning, and we are very thankful to have him back again. So a few words about Professor Bezawada. He's a professor and head of the Computer Science and Engineering Department at Mahindra University Kuala Central School of Engineering. He holds a PhD in Computer Science and Engineering from Michigan State University, United States. He has 15 years of experience in performing top quality network security research in world-class universities like Michigan State University, International Institute of Information Technology, Hyderabad, and Nanjing University in China. With no further ado, Professor, I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zudu. Very glad to be back here. I hope that this will be as interesting. So, many of you might be well aware of the Internet of Things revolution that's been going about, and many of you might be wondering what are the different, what does it mean to us, and what does it mean to the cybersecurity scenario. Uh, so before I don't want to go into the definitions of what Internet of Things is. Basically, the word came from the scenario where we started connecting any device to the internet, and this device would be capable of sending and receiving data. So this kind of because we now had non-general computing desktop devices connected to the internet, we started calling these special devices as Internet of Things. So these devices. So once you connect new devices to the internet still remains the same. That means you have the general computing devices that are going to coexist along with these other devices, the special devices. So therein therein lies a very uh, interesting phenomena that you have devices which are specialized and which are which don't have the features of general computing devices, but they are coexisting on the internet along with these devices. So what we are going to talk about are some security issues in these in this framework, and see how we can resolve them with certain techniques. So this work is actually was a collaborative effort, and I'm still continuing. We have a continuing collaboration with NSF, Cable Labs, and the Center for Cybersecurity Analytics at and automation at Colorado State University. So without much, let me just show you an example. So basically, we have a lot of IoT devices. So let's take the home and Internet of Things system. So basically, uh, if you see around you, I mean, if anybody is using a smart TV already, then you're already part of the Internet of Things ecosystem, because the smart TV is actually is a system which is a non-computing, non-general purpose device which connects to the internet and receives data and sends data. And when you have such a scenario wherein you can connect any kind of device to the internet, you are going to have a situation where security becomes a very important aspect, because you can create you can add more devices, you can remove devices, and moreover, these devices that you keep adding to this to the existing network can start interacting with each other. Okay? And these devices can bring in their own set of protocols. They can actually implement their own application layer protocols. All of this actually makes these traditional mechanisms of security. We have to rethink and revisit those things. Okay? So this is what. So for instance, if you had used an IDS system or some kind of a firewall with certain rules, assuming that you are going to run mostly desktop devices, but then you brought in a few smart bulbs and a smart TV, then the IDS may not be able to, understand the traffic that is coming from this particular smart bulb. Maybe there are some protocols this particular device is using, and they get by without any detection. So security becomes a very important aspect. Okay, so here is a very simple scenario. You can see that we have a home device. This can be as well as a perfect. It can be a industrial network as well. Okay, you have a smart lock here, your smart camera here, a smart bulb, a thermostat, and monitoring, even a security monitoring system. And then you also have, a way to control all these devices. Typically, there's a mobile application, or you can even control it through a desktop application. So this mobile device, for instance, will have an interface to each of these devices, which allows you to log in or send control messages to these devices. See? So here you can see that this is how you can think about it. So what are the different? Let's take some examples. So there are some security cameras which provide video surveillance, and the homeowner can actually connect to this camera and get live feeds of the video. You can have a smart lock which can be turned on and off. There's a thermostat that can be adjusted through the internet, right? So of course, thermostat is an unknown concept in India, but in most closed, corporate buildings, you might find a well-managed smart thermostat operating. Then there are video bells, which are most likely to become very common, in the coming future, wherein which basically a video bell is like somebody can ring a bell and you can see the picture of this particular person uh, sent to the homeowner through the internet. So this is a bird's eye view, and the different interactions you can think of. For instance, security monitoring system could query the motion sensor or security camera. So as I told you, the moment you introduce these devices into your network, it is quite likely that these devices will start communicating amongst themselves. They might start querying different, other different servers in the network. They might try to discover other devices in the network, right? So for instance, the security monitoring system could actually query the motion sensors and security cameras. A mobile phone could actually turn on the microwave at certain time. A smart fridge could actually query temperature sensors for adjusting the cooling level. Okay, and video bell could actually keep giving periodic updates to the homeowner. So, what are the security scenarios you can think of? So, well, let's talk about the general scenarios before we get into the scenario that we're going to talk about. That is the purpose of this talk. So, for instance, there can be unauthorized data requests that can be made to these devices, right? So somebody can try to query these devices and get some information about the homeowner, for instance. Some of these devices could actually come with malware, or they could actually be infected with a malware because somebody just came in and connected their device to their cell phone to these devices, and the malware was in the cell phone of the person who connected, right? Uh, Sometimes the device could actually be communicating on a frequency that other devices are communicating with, or they could be trying to control the same device at the same time. Okay. There could be misconfigured devices in this network which can actually cause disruption to the rest of the network. So for instance, you can have a smart TV that is misbehaving, and that could actually disrupt your regular day-to-day internet connectivity. And sometimes we can just add a new device that could actually destabilize the network, and this is something which which is what we call as a scenario in a large network. For instance, we would like to know what happens if we add a new device. Okay, so these are some security scenarios which which are brought about because of the specialized devices that are being introduced into your network. Okay. Now, let's come to the questions that we can actually answer. We cannot answer every question that I just mentioned because each of them is a different problem by itself. So, what can we do to prevent at least a few? Where can we start with? Let us say we can start with the case where we say that the devices that we just purchased from the from the shop or someplace else are not stolen or compromised or replaced. Okay, so if we can ensure this, then maybe we can be sure that we have our network is not compromised, or security is still intact. If we can also ensure that, okay, let's keep some kind of a tab on the device, some kind of a monitoring on the device to kind of see if the device keeps behaving in its within its acceptable parameters. This sounds nice, right? I mean, if the device doesn't misbehave, then you have a reasonably secure scenario. Okay, but here comes the real scenario. Uh, uh, how do you actually know whether a device is stolen or replaced with some other device? Or how do you know whether a device is not being compromised by a malware, right? So this has to be done automatically, because by the next year, I mean, at present, if a home consists of 4 users, 4 people, you can be assured that there are at least 20 IoT devices in the network. So that means, a person cannot keep on monitoring each of these 20 devices manually. So there needs to be some kind of automatic verification algorithm. Okay. So let us see how we can actually check whether a device is, replaced or not. We can actually have some sort of a device identity verification algorithm, right? Suppose we insert a malware in a device, maybe the device behavior changes, right? So let's say if we can tie up the identity of the device to its behavior, and all we need to then do is that verify the identity of the device. Okay. So we can develop such an algorithm, and then we can periodically verify the identity of the device. And this is what we are going to look at. So take the very simple scenario that you have bought a device into your network, and you have deployed it, and you know that this is from Philips, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now there are two things that could have happened. Somebody could have injected a malware into this device, which makes the device behavior, different from what it should be. Or somebody could have come into your home, and they could have replaced this Philips device with a cheaper device, right? So we want to consider both these scenarios and see how we can actually, defend against such a scenario. Okay. So let's first start talking about uh, this device identification part, right? So if we can have a method which can actually give a device identification, like what the device is, right? And if we can actually authenticate the device, let's say if we can verify whether we can actually check whether the device is the one that it claims to be, then these two are actually pretty good enough for us to solve the problems that I just talked about, right? Because you can always verify the device identity, and the device identity is tied to the behavior of the device, so we can always check for the device behavior. And authentication actually ensures a stronger capability. Like you can, if it says I'm a Philips bulb, and if there is a method for me to verify it's a Philips bulb, then I'm pretty sure that I'm still having Philips bulb in my house, right? So what are the techniques for authentication? Unfortunately, the best technique for authentication, especially for unknown scenarios, is public key. Okay, so if you have a public key certificate, and which a device can produce, then basically this is a pretty good way to verify the device, authenticate the device. Okay, but unfortunately, implementing a proper public key system on a device itself can be a very expensive thing for many IoT devices. But this lecture is not about how we can replace public keys with cheaper alternatives. There's a whole bunch of research in the domain that actually talks about those kind of solutions. I mean, interesting work, and but in the end, it all comes down to whether it can be implemented or not. So we'll look at what is the second thing. So how do we check the identification of a device, right? So can we check the identity of a device without public keys? Like for instance, can we use the MAC address of the device, or can we do something else, right? Or can we look at sometimes many devices actually have a banner. They send out a banner saying that I am Philips so and so device, but this banner is sent out in plain text. Okay. So the question is, can we trust this banner, right? Because even a masqueraded device, even a device which is replaced, which has just replaced the original device, can also send out such a banner. Okay. Yeah. So somebody is asking whether identification is username, authentication is password. Uh, Not really. I'm talking about the methods the for validating these are two different properties we want to ensure. Okay, they're not the same thing. Okay. So what we want to focus on this in this particular talk is, can we at least we cannot solve the authentication problem because that is only solvable using public key certificate. You need a public key certificate that has been signed by a trusted third party. That is the only way you can actually authenticate the device. But we want to focus on something else. Can we look at some way of coming out with identity for a device, right? Can we somehow fingerprint a device, right? Can we somehow, this fingerprint can then be unique. Fingerprinting is like, your thumb fingerprint, for instance, right? So it is unique to a particular person, right? So thumb or any of the digits on your hand, those fingerprints are unique. So can we have something like that uh, for a IoT device? And all we need to do is whether we have to keep checking the fingerprints periodically to check this. There are lots of challenges in doing this kind of fingerprint analysis or this kind of thing in IoT, because this is just a slide that shows you the number of protocols in use in IoT devices. I will not even get started on, in fact, most of the protocols you can see here, the application and the communication protocols, they are a lot. Many times the network protocols are okay. They are, mostly IP and all that. Even the discovery protocols are okay, like DNS or MDNS or physical web. But the actual, the link layer protocols and the data, the application layer protocols, they are huge. Okay, so many protocols are out there, and this kind of makes very challenging to analyze these devices. Okay. Let me just take a look. Okay, that's a good question about whether certain apps from different countries are trusted in India or not, or how do you trust IoT devices manufactured in other countries? That's actually this is what we want to answer. Okay, so we'll try to answer. Of course, the question is very fundamental, but the answer is very difficult to arrive at, and we'll try to answer some part of it today. Okay, so we need to have some way of. So let me first uh, bring you to the scenario where we want to create fingerprints for a device. Now there are two kinds of fingerprints that we can think of for a given IoT device. Okay, one is we can actually fingerprint the particular type of the device. Okay, so what do you mean by device type? So a device type can be something like all bulbs have a common fingerprint. Okay, so there are several bulbs and all of them have a common fingerprint. Let's say all bulbs from Philips have a common fingerprint, right? But we are not exactly, able to distinguish between different bulbs from Philips. Okay, so for instance, a device could be, if once you are able to establish that kind of device type fingerprint, when we buy a new device, all we need to check is whether this device is behaving the way these types of devices are supposed to behave, right? So then this is a good thing, right? So if you can identify the device type, then you know the expected behavior of that particular device, right? And then you can enforce some sort of a control to ensure that if the device misbehaves, then we can kind of block the device communication, which is falling outside of the device type behavior. Uh, but this doesn't solve the problem of a device being replaced with another device, right? Suppose I replace Philips bulb with some cheaper version, and it will still behave like a device, Philips bulb. Okay, but it's just a different type of, it's a different device altogether. It's a cheaper device, right? It can fail at any given point of time. So this is what we call as device instance identification, wherein we can actually distinguish the physical device from one physical device from another physical device. Okay. And if we can get these two features, then we can actually talk about a proper solution for the IoT device. We can think of enforcing different kinds of controls, or we can think of ensuring that these devices do not compromise the rest of the network. Okay. So here's what is a good picture which shows the thing. So let's say there are different kinds of light bulbs. We call this light bulb, let's call this category as light bulb. Okay. Let's call it as device category. You can have subcategories, like say you have colored lights and you have monochrome lights. Then you can have different different companies making these lights, like Philips, CCP, Evox. And here is where the device type and device instances vary. So you can see here, TCP light makes two types of bulbs. One is A19 and one is A21. Okay. So this is what I'm saying, what I call as device type. Okay. So A21 is, for instance, is the device type, right? So any bulb that belongs to this A21 type will have to have similar characteristics. Now we can have two different physical bulbs of the same type, like serial, let's call them serial number 1, serial number 2. These are what we call as device instances. Okay. So fingerprinting device type and fingerprinting device instances are entirely two different problems. Okay. So we'll talk about both the problems. In brief, actually the device instance fingerprinting is a much more difficult problem because of the way there are very limited kind of number of approaches you can do. Especially it cannot be done remotely most of the time. But you can do device type fingerprinting remotely. This we'll talk about both these. There's a question that says, should an indexes IoT devices which are using port forwarding and all that? Yes, you can prevent all that by just having blockout showdown. Then because you can just configure your firewall to say that don't allow any incoming traffic from showdown. You can say, can restrictions be calibrated for each device where you can only interact with the device? Yes, this can be done, and this is something that it's something that people are actually exploring a lot. Can we actually restrict the device so that it only communicates with certain types of devices? And this is actually a pretty good approach to secure your network. Okay. So let me clarify. As I said, device fingerprinting is specific to physical device, and for device fingerprinting, we are basically going to look at physical imperfections of the device. I mean, not that the device is imperfect, but there are some components of the device which can have physical imperfections. We just block incoming traffic, right? Just use the IP address of Shodan to block. Put a rule in the input gateway of your firewall. Okay. For device type fingerprinting, we try to observe the behavior of the device, right? We try to observe we try to fingerprint the profile of the device, and then that is the fingerprint of the particular device. Most of the methods focus on host and network traffic analysis. Okay? So here's an example of device fingerprinting. Okay, so for instance, in fact, this is one of the sure shot methods to fingerprint an actual device. This will work regardless of whether you're fingerprinting an IoT device, or I mean, if the device actually supports this thing, this will work whether it will work for any kind of computing device. So many devices actually have what are called as clock skews. I mean, you have a clock in your computer that actually runs. Every computer has a clock. Because of the let's say you want to fingerprint a device. So one way to do it is that you can measure what is called as a clock skew. So typically your clock should count the time units it does perfectly. But unfortunately, because of physical imperfections of the crystal, the quartz crystals, this kind of varies from device to device. And this was actually observed in 1999, where people have actually used this method to distinguish between two physical devices. Okay, but of course, measuring this will actually require you to measure the clock skew. Here you can see that there is a real clock here, and as time elapses, your device will count something else. And if there was some other device, that would have counted something else. Okay, so if you take this real clock count as absolute time measurement, this can be your own laptop, and then there can be some other laptop that counts differently. But this actually kind of requires some support from, if you want to do remote measurement of these variations, there has to be some support from the TCP timestamp. So there has to be some way to measure these variations. People have tried different methods like being in the physical presence of the device and then trying to measure the link layer frame variance and things like that. This is still a pretty open, area to look at. So basically, device fingerprinting, just to generalize and summarize, and we basically observe the physical components of the device and quantify their imperfections. So quantify means we try to put these, we measure the various outputs of these components, and we try to put them through some kind of a similarity detection algorithm, or we can put them through some kind of a machine learning algorithm. So either ways, we should be able to, uniquely fingerprint a device. Say, for instance, you can measure the output of RF components of a given device, right? Like say from Wi-Fi 802.11, GSM, Zigbee, or Bluetooth. And this signal output, which we assume that is in a digital format, can be actually then quantified using different methods, and then a fingerprint can be generated based on that. So there's a question is, will there be a scenario where devices interact to change each other's fingerprint? Maybe it's quite possible, not unknown. So we have to be clear on what kind of fingerprint are we talking about. A device can change its behavioral profile, that is its device type fingerprint, but a device cannot change its physical fingerprint, which is the device fingerprint. So here's a general approach for device fingerprinting. I'm not going to talk about the device fingerprinting in this talk because it's not on that. So general approach is you collect the output, digital output from the physical component like camera, gyroscope, or RF signals. Use signal processing algorithms to filter, eliminate obvious noise. Perform some kind of normalization on the data. And also many times we want to only measure the imperfections of the component. We don't want to measure the data side of things. Like let us say I'm using a cell phone, and I don't want to collect data when the person is speaking on that phone. So that actually is a user defined content, right? So that's going to bias the fingerprint. So we don't want to do this. So we need to have somewhere to remove that user specific content. Finally, we extract from the output, we extract the features and generate the fingerprint. Okay. So this is a picture I have also shown the, if you are very interested in physical layer, device fingerprinting, I recommend this particular survey very strongly. Okay. So they have given a pretty nice summary of, all different ways of device fingerprinting. So here you take this device, digitize the data, and then you perform all these pre-processing techniques like power synchronization, power normalization, synchronization, and then extract the non-content artifacts, which can be sent to some kind of a similarity matching. Like here, for instance, do some kind of a similarity matching or verification or identification algorithm, or you can apply some kind of a machine learning algorithm, as you can see in these orange boxes, to kind of extract the fingerprints. So this is about fingerprinting. So our focus is on device type fingerprinting, and how people do device type fingerprinting. So broadly speaking, there are these 4 or 5 methods by which we can do device type fingerprinting. So for instance, you can measure the data plane traffic. And what is data plane traffic? You have the application transport layer traffic, which uh, right. So for instance, uh, what people do is that they want to observe the device behavior remotely, or they want to see how this device behaves, on the network. Okay. So, for instance, they could observe the HTTP traffic coming out of this device, right? So, HTTP traffic or DNS traffic or all these traffic is, can be very specific to that particular device. For instance, the device might be using HTTP traffic to send out its responses to the mobile app, right? Uh, we could also look at whether it's making DNS queries, how many times it's making. So all these are application layer protocols. I mean, this is just it's not an exhaustive list. I'm just saying that people can observe this. This is the data plane traffic. So people can observe this traffic, extract some features, and create a fingerprint of this particular device type. Or you can look at the control plane traffic, which is basically the link layer and network layer traffic, and also do a similar analysis. Like you can analyze the ICMP, ARP, Ethernet, and those kind of things, right? So, or you can also look at uh, what is called as this request response kind of traffic. Okay, so okay, so what is a request response kind of thing? With this, we'll come to it in a moment. Basically, if you send a particular request, this particular device could be responding to that in a particular way, and there could be some variation in the time, the way it is responding. So all of these is actually could be unique to the particular device type. Okay, uh, and also you could look at the traffic flow analysis of a device. So this again is a very this is similar to network traffic analysis, where we actually consider the different IP addresses with which the device is communicating. So we call a traffic flow is basically when you have the same source IP and same destination IP. So that is like a pipe, and we look at the packets flowing on this pipe between these two fixed IPs, and then extract some features, right? So these features are useful to analyze the traffic flows. Okay, uh, the people can also look at. So one of the approach people have used and is very successful is they have also measured what is known as the periodicity of the traffic. Okay, so many devices actually send out a lot of data. They send out a lot of traffic on different using different kinds of protocols, right? For instance, a particular device could be making a lot of ARP queries, which could be with certain periodicity. Okay, so if we can measure the periodicity, different device types could be having different kinds of periodicities, and this kind of gives you a good device type fingerprint. Okay. Then one of the things that people have done a lot is behavioral analysis, like looked at how the device is behaving and understand the behavior of the device, and based on this behavior, do a fingerprint. And this is something that I'll talk about. And more recently, there has been increasing interest in trying to understand and group similar devices in a network using clustering. So what happens is that a person just doesn't want to fingerprint a particular device type. He just wants to know which of the devices in the network are behaving in a similar fashion. And for that, the analyst would actually extract various traffic or different kinds of traffic data, and then pass it through some clustering algorithm to check whether certain devices are behaving together. Okay, so this is again a popular approach. And then these are different other approaches. These are something which we just talked about. So there is scope is it is just one of those things attached which gives you the direction and things which way you are moving and stuff like that. So it's a one sort of a sensor on a cell phone. Then we have so let's talk about how to fingerprint devices by looking at the behavior of the device. Okay, so let's establish here that we are not focusing on the device fingerprinting. Okay, we are focusing on the device type. That means we want to observe the device traffic. We want to observe of course, we are assuming that we cannot observe the device behavior from inside the device, right? Because you cannot run analysis tools like host IDS or anything inside IoT device. You can observe the network traffic of the IoT device. So what is observable is that the network traffic coming from the IoT device. So I'll also show you how that can be captured. Okay. So basically, we want to observe the information, and we will basically, use these observations to kind of characterize the behavior of the device. Okay. So let me see. Let me just move on to the how to observe the behavior. Okay. So let's say you have the IP packets from the device, right? So this is most feasible. And what we can do with these IP packets is that, for instance, one of the approaches, the initial approaches, they basically took the header features of this particular IP packets. So they started the device. So they booted up the device, each IoT device, and observed the IP packets sent out by the device during the initial few minutes, right? And they extracted all these packet headers, and these packet headers were used to generate the fingerprint of the device. And this particular method kind of got you about 50 to 100% identification rate. Okay, so can we improve upon this? Does this actually capture the behavior of a device, right? So just to put things in perspective, that how far this research area was, this paper came out in 2017. That's about only 3 years from now, right? It was only 3 years back. Okay. So, and by the time IoT as an area was already existing. So that means this kind of fingerprinting approaches, they started pretty late inside the IoT security domain. Okay. So one initial approach started with analyzing the packet headers. Okay. So can we do something better than packet headers? Can we actually observe the packet? So for instance, these are the protocols that you can, these are the features. So you can look at this part here. Forget this bottom part. That I'll come to that in a moment. So you have the link layer features. You have the network layer features. So for instance, we can check whether the device is a ARP packet, whether the packet is a ARP packet, whether the packet is the IP ICP packet. So basically the idea is we take all these IP packets, from each packet we extract all this information, right? So we have a feature vector. Let us say, I think this is about 17 features here. So if any of the feature is present, then we put a 1 there. Otherwise we put a 0 there. So like this, we extract the 17 features and then we train a machine learning classifier. Okay. So this was done in the past. And on top of it, so one of the things that we observed, or what we did in our research, is that the behavior of the device is not dependent only on the packet headers, because packet headers are more like a control aspect of the device. They don't actually convey much about the device behavior itself. So there may be certain features like the payload length of the packets, or the payload or the TCP window sizes, right? So these are actually features that actually depend on the particular device. So why these are depending on the device behavior? Because for instance, you take a smart bulb, right? So it sends out packets, but the payload of this particular smart bulb are not going to be pretty large. They're going to be very small. So the payload length of a smart bulb, and compared, what we have is, if you think of a packet as two components, one is the header and other as the payload. So you can see that the payload, the header part gives you some kind of a static behavior of the device. It's not exactly accurate, but if you look at the payload, which is more dynamic, it kind of gives you a better understanding of the device behavior. Okay. So for instance, one of the features which is interesting is the entropy. Okay. So what is entropy? Is basically the type of information content in a given payload. So if you see different devices, they use different kinds of ways to encode their requests and responses. Most of them use JSON, XML, but many of them also go with the plain old HTTP request response kind of thing. So effectively, the type of encoding kind of determines how much entropy is there in the particular payload. Okay, so that different device types can actually end up using different entropy. Okay? For different devices can also have different payload lengths. For instance, small devices send small messages, larger devices send larger messages. This is a direct observation, right? This is again a behavioral aspect of a device. Then the TCP window length is actually something that actually is a feature that is quite interesting, because those devices that use TCP as their protocol, they keep varying this TCP window, and the TCP window can keep varying from very small to very large. But on an average, small devices will have small window sizes because of its capability. It cannot process large window data, right? So small devices, for instance, will have to use flow control to reduce their window sizes. So this is something that again is typical of the device's behavioral characteristics. So there are many features one can use to identify the device behavior, but these are some common features that we have looked at, and we have kind of analyzed their the nature of these features on different devices. We took three different devices. Like one is a D-Link camera here, and other two, one is the TP-Link light is like a black and white, and this Hue light is a colored light. So you can see that the D-Link camera actually had, looking at the payload entropy, the entropy was quite high for this particular D-Link camera for majority of the time. Okay, so whereas for this TP-Link and Philips Hue, the entropy was not so good. In fact, you can see that the Philips Hue's entropy was little lesser compared to the black and white TP-Link light. Okay, that's because Philips and TP-Link are two different companies, right? So, but this kind of shows you that this entropy is a good way to separate the payload entropy. So the payload entropy, if used as a feature, can kind of characterize the
Professor, there is no sound.
D-Link, for instance.
Okay.
Yes. So, okay. And similarly with the TCP window size. Okay. So, what is the behavioral approach? So, although I'm talking about the work that we have done as part of this research, but this is a general approach. So, effectively, what people do is that we try to observe the device behavior. Uh, we try to model the device behavior as a distinct set of command response sequences. Okay, so let us say what is the behavior. You can say I'm going to turn on the light, right? So that is and the light turns on. So the time where I send the command to say turn the light on, and the time where the light turns on and sends back a response saying that the light has turned on, this part is the command response sequence, and this is what we call as a behavior. Okay, if we change the color of the light, for instance, right, that is also a behavior. So this is what we call as this command response sequences are what we call as sessions. Where the last two slides of the graph, I think maybe it could be just you, I guess, right? I mean, repeating is not possible. I'm already running short on time. So I'm just saying that these are two pictures, these are two ECDF plots which show the distribution of the feature value. Okay, so this kind of tell you how different, how we can separate the feature values of the different devices. Okay. So let's focus on the approach, right? That is more important. So you have this command response sequence, we can call it as a session, right? So then now with this model, you can then look at the device behavior as a collection of different sessions. Okay. So now the thing is, if you have any session data, then any of the session data should correspond to the fingerprint of the particular device, right? So this is the kind of approach that can be taken. So if we look at the device behavior as a collection of sessions. Okay, I'm calling it as a collection, not a sequence, because any behavior can happen at any given point of time, right? So there can be the same behavior can be repeated. But if the device has that behavior, we can say that that particular it is some sort of a fingerprint of that particular device, or it is some sort of a contribution towards the fingerprint of that particular device. Okay, so this is a way we can try to do this. Now, what are the challenges in this kind of approach? So this is a basic approach. Like we say that we just model it as sequence of sessions and said that, okay, we'll try to capture the behavior of the device. The problem is, it is not possible for you to capture all possible behaviors of a given device, right? Because when you run the device, you may not explore all its capabilities, right? You may not know, you may not have seen all its behavior. So encoding the entire, observing or encoding the entire session data is not possible. You need to sample the observed behavior. There is a question about some hack in Singapore. If you're talking about the hack where if you're talking about the attacks on video cameras through passwords and login names, that is actually the problem with the device's application interface. I mean, there is something different. Okay, it is not difficult to encrypt. It is not difficult to secure these interfaces, but the manufacturers don't do that. I haven't gotten into the scenario where many manufacturers are there inside a IoT domain. They just want to push out a device without any care about security. They build poor software. They don't implement a lot of security into. They don't use standard protocols, and many people even use weaker AES protocols, AES encryption. So this is all leading up to this big mess of IoT devices not being very secure. Anyway, so coming back to this, so let's say that we have different sessions at different lengths. So we need to figure out how to sample a device. So you are trying to observe the device. So we have two phases. One is we have the device deployed in the network, and you want to generate the fingerprint of the device. For that, you need to observe the behavior of the device for a certain time. This is what we call as sampling the behavior of the device. Once we get the behavior of the device, assuming that at this point the device is not misbehaving, now we can generate the fingerprint using this sample data. So after we generate the fingerprint, we keep observing, we keep checking the device, we keep collecting data from the device periodically, and run it through this fingerprint to see if the device behavior has changed any given point of time. Now the challenge being that device has multiple behavior, so encoding it is difficult, and also different sessions can have different data lengths, right? So the number of packets. So if you assume, so when you say data length, we're talking about how many packets consist or make up a given session, and finding the best sample size is again a challenge. This is something that if you are going to do research in this domain, you will find that this is not a non-trivial problem. Okay, so we were able to just do this with a pen and paper calculation and tried out these things on a sample set of devices. We were able to decide the sampling length. That means the number of packets you observe from a device that can be treated as a fingerprint. We set it to be about 5 packets. Okay. So what this means is that we collect these 5 packets, extract all those features I showed you in the table, and then you call this as a fingerprint. Okay. So for the training phase, we just collect a lot of these things. So we capture the data through interaction or observation. Then we split the data into samples of 5 consecutive packets, and then we generate those 100 features, and then we train a machine learning classifier. So once you have these samples, you train the machine learning classifier, right? And basically each device is fingerprint. We hope that the classifier learns the device fingerprint. Okay. So this is a standard approach for doing this. So this is, you can see there is a wireless IoT devices and you have wired IoT devices, and which are connected through this. This can be any kind of, it can be a software defined switch, or it can be a regular Ethernet switch. So we can run the packet capture analysis on this particular part here, right? We don't actually collect, we don't have to actually be running any T-Shark or Wireshark, anything on these devices. You can just run it on this internet gateway, and the packet analysis capture module will actually do this and run it through the fingerprinting module. Okay, so this is our setup we had, we tried, and so I'll come back to the questions a bit later. So because I just want to show how we did. So we could wave. This is our data capture approach. So what we did is we booted up a device. We allowed it to perform some initial configuration, and then we started interacting with the device. Okay, and collected the data, and then we allowed some periodic idle times of communication so that let the device do its own thing sometimes without user intervention. So if it's a device that is interactive, we interacted. Otherwise, we allow uh, and we allowed some idle times. If it is a device that does not interact with the user, we just collected the data by just running a Wireshark on this particular device. I mean, on the gateway for a long time. Okay, so many devices actually generate a very less number of packets even over a period of time. For instance, there was one motion sensor that only generated about 1,000 packets, whereas there was a camera that generated 10,000 packets in one second. So this is kind of data you will end up getting. Okay, and the rest of it is fairly straightforward. You can use this different kinds of classifiers to do this. So this is what we tried out. This is the amount of, this is a different number of devices. Now you can actually, if you look at the literature, you can take a look at the, I have written a survey on how to do this fingerprinting using behavioral fingerprinting for different, using different methods. You may want to take a look at that. So wherein we actually tried different, you will see that lots of labs around the world have actually increased the number of devices in their labs to now we had, when we tried it, we had about 23 devices, out of which we could fingerprint about 14 devices. But now you can see 50 or more. So we have experimented with a lot of different on this we tried device type fingerprinting using the method I just told you. We also explored a little more about the device category fingerprints, like grouping like TP-Link bulb and the Philips bulb into one group, for instance, right? So those things were kind of difficult. We also tried to do device instance fingerprinting, but that didn't work out so well because I mean the output was still that it was not so. Anyway, so this is the these are all again. I would keep it fairly straightforward. We basically tried we tested the true positive rate and other things. So what I want to do is I'll just pause here for a moment just to say that problem of IoT device type fingerprinting is important because understanding the device behavior is a really difficult and complex task, and you might find that if you are going to work in an organization, for instance, and which has a lot of cameras and a lot of other things, then you may want to actually think about having some kind of a fingerprinting approach that will kind of monitor these devices for checking whether they are behaving under acceptable parameters. Many times people use cryptographic solutions to, they try to see if they can, they encrypt all the communication from the device to and from the device. So those are all good. I mean, but that doesn't ensure that the device is still secure because your interface with the device might be secure using encryption, but a malware can still be present inside the device that actually can make the device misbehave. So this is a pretty broad area of research and for exploration. With a good lab and with good number of devices, and or even if you have a good network at your disposal, performing fingerprinting might be a good exercise and for security. Okay, so I'll stop here and I would like to take questions because I think we are already running short on time.
Yes, indeed. And thank you for your lecture once more. Maybe you have answered some of these questions, but I can start posing them. The first one is, how do we restrict, prevent from Shodan or OSINT tools?
You can restrict Shodan and other things, just like you configure your internet gateway, block everything that comes from this particular domain, right? Block all incoming. I mean, normally your device can, if it normally you cannot, any website cannot simply communicate with something inside your organization, inside your house. But there are ways, Shodan tries to bypass it. So you can just block the IP addresses that are coming from Shodan. So that could be one way to do it.
Thank you. The next question says, can device fingerprints be duplicated in order to do some version of impersonation?
Device type fingerprints can be replicated, but device fingerprint itself cannot be replicated because it's specific to the given device. It depends on the physical characteristics of the device.
The next question is, browser fingerprinting legal?
What is the browser fingerprinting?
Legal. Is it lawful?
Browser fingerprinting, that's a different kind of scenario. No, it is. I don't know whether it's legal or not. I think that's a different question for the legal team, I guess, right?
Okay, so and then can you specify, please, which IP address can be accessed through IoT devices?
Not see, that depends on how your network is set up. So if most of the times the network is set up in such a way that if the data can go through the common gateway, then you can run access control or firewall on the gateway to restrict the inter-device communication inside your network. But if that is not possible, like if the device is using Bluetooth or infrared to directly communicate, then you cannot restrict such communication because it doesn't go through the gateway.
Thank you. I think, let me see if we have any more questions. Yes, okay, so one more maybe. Can the fingerprint be used for identification and authentication?
It can be used for identification, not for authentication.
Okay.